Generally, you only give away the lore of your fiction at the end of a story if you give it away at all. 343 Industries landed on the opposite side of the long-standing fiction guidelines by revealing everything you didn't even need to know in the first entry of a brand new Halo storyline. Lore is only fun when it's speculative, allowing you to come to your own conclusions when presented with a brief glance at a much larger story that you were only at the tail end of. It's like watching the third part of a trilogy and trying to piece together what happened in the films you didn't watch by reading far too much into snippets of dialogue. And it might surprise the average observer to learn that Halo was once crammed full of Larry Niven-inspired space opera. I say was because Halo 4 decided to clarify a few things, and every clarification stripped any and all intrigue the series once had. Instead of debating some new angle on the old story, all you're left doing is filling in those fan wiki entries. I never had an issue with Halo's lore when it was just a simple explanation for why ancient aliens built a bunch of rings in space to destroy other aliens, and why another bunch of aliens later on misinterpreted their intentions and created a religion to worship said ancient aliens while trying to exterminate all human life. The problem started once the original story wrapped up in Halo 3. Uh-oh, the Covenant are broken, the Flood are gone, and no one likes fighting brutes. What do we do for Halo 4? How about we bring that bunch of ancient aliens back, and surprise, they hate humans too and want to kill them all. Now the lore is standing in the forefront instead of providing a nice gentle bokeh in the background that highlights the actual focus of the past games. It feels like a game made by fans that were overwhelmed by the fact that they suddenly got to turn all their fan fiction into canon. So everything gets an explanation and all the mystery that might have attracted you to the lore in the first place is gone. Perhaps all this can be blamed on Halo being placed under a new developer, Bungie having escaped to work on Destiny, which probably isn't that much of an escape in hindsight, and 343 Industries taking the helm. It was always going to be an awkward transition, like a new girlfriend trying to do things your old girlfriend used to do in the bedroom, and you can't help but compare the two, and find the new Halo just a bit of a dead fish despite how much she's dressed up. Yes, I just compared this game to boring sex. If I had a Raid Shadow Legends sponsorship lined up, this is where I would segue into it. Now stop sending me emails offering me money to talk about it. You might recall that the forward unto dawn looked a bit different at the end of Halo 3. It's such a bizarre detail to change. It's a destroyed spaceship you see in detail once. Since everyone shuts her the hell up on Windows, Cortana turned to OnlyFans to keep herself busy while Master Chief was in suspended animation. I have to wonder why an AI would need to use window visualizations as she navigates by swiping. Cortana is the most advanced AI humanity ever created, but when I see her doing her job like this, I can't help but feel I could file my taxes faster than she could. Not only did Cortana change Master Chief's HUD for no reason and make it more obtrusive, she somehow redesigned his Mjolnir armor as well, since there are noticeable differences from what he wore at the end of Halo 3 when he placed himself in cryo after they were lost in space. The Covenant returned in the form of the Storm Covenant, which is run by the elites, the aliens the original Covenant betrayed and attempted to wipe out. Now a faction of them want to continue their genocide against humans despite having zero reason to. This is some incredibly poorly explained reasoning for why Master Chief has to fight elites again. This being a first-person shooter, it wouldn't be much of a review if I didn't tally up the combat. Halo has always been a very convenient shooter. Every enemy is big and chunky and moved just slow enough so that aiming at it with thumbsticks on a console was possible. You can only rock 2 weapons, grenades got their own dedicated button, shields recharge instantly so you never have to ration health packs, and melee attacks actually do some damage. All well and good for the dad-bod suburban shooter. But with Halo 4, the dancing girls that used to fan you and feed you grapes have gotten a little past their prime. First, it seems like someone had the idea that shooting at enemies isn't as fun as looking for the guns to shoot them with, so every enemy feels more bullet spongy than they used to, which is saying a lot for a series that was already full of bullet sponges, and guns seem to carry less ammo, so every firefight sees a stop to the action midway so Master Chief can scavenge whatever nearly depleted gun an enemy dropped. And let's be clear, not every gun in Halo is made equal. What you want are single or burst shot mid-range weapons, which there are about 3 of and rarely appear. Anything else and you might as well be firing Cheetos at your target. Grenades also seem to be less useful overall, since I would swear enemies were dodge rolling out of the way of them before they even left my hand. I probably killed less than a dozen enemies with the damn things. None of it was bad enough to make me dislike the combat, but it did leave me feeling like I was fighting the mechanics more than the enemies. The manual firing controls for the forward unto dawn's missiles are placed on the outer hull. To any reasonable person, sticking your emergency fire controls in a hard-to-reach hostile environment would elicit a "the fuck" response during the design phase. After all, my fuse box isn't found at the bottom of a wood chipper. But in Halo, this would barely register compared to some incredibly daft design decisions. This is the same universe where someone thought it was a great idea to stick an obstacle course on the top of a ship in case someone needed to drive a jeep across it during an emergency.
It's using a gravity well to pull us inside the surface. We've got to hurry. The second we cross the dome's event horizon, its atmosphere is going to tear us apart.
Surviving re-entry in their suit is something Spartans do all the time, so Cortana demanding Chief get to an escape pod isn't as urgent as she makes it seem. He survives the fall into Requiem's gravity well just fine in his suit instead of the burnt piece of carbon he should be.
Cortana.
I was put into service 8 years ago.
8 years?
AIs deteriorate after 7, Chief.
Cortana got hotter around the same time she got crazier. Coincidence?
It is possible that getting home could help me find a solution for my rampancy.
How?
Well, as far as I know, I'm the only AI ever generated from living tissue. A clone of Dr. Halsey, to be precise. It may be possible to recompile my neural net by replicating those same conditions.
Cortana proposes that one possible solution to her looming rampancy might be returning her to factory settings. I wish I were making that up, but that's what it amounts to.
Chief, I'm hearing that strange signal again. Stronger this time.
The first half of Halo 4 consists of Cortana reminding the Master Chief that she keeps picking up weird radio signals, then directing him to the nearest USB port to plug her in so she can continue to be puzzled over said radio signal and maybe open a door or turn on an elevator. Cortana may have been the one to popularize a first-person secretary role back in Combat Evolved, but she's done little else since then but feel increasingly pointless. If anything, it feels like she holds things back, since every solution to a problem is to get Cortana to a terminal so she can switch something on or off. To give you an idea of how exciting this process is, I ask you to turn Cortana on your computer back on for a day and try using her. It's not exactly compelling when the only justification for your existence is that no one placed buttons on any of the computers.
What happened?
I don't know. It locked up. I'm detecting power fluctuations in several locations. I'll put them up for you.
In Halo, anything worth doing once is worth doing twice. It's like the Forerunners built facilities that would only make sense from a gameplay point of view, and weren't designed to be lived or worked in. I get that the point is to have Cortana and Cortana's ass on screen more since the game is focusing on her and Master Chief's relationship, but there had to be a better way than finding a terminal for her hologram every 5 minutes. Since half the enemies Master Chief used to fight were wiped out back in Halo 3, Halo 4 had to introduce some new ones, the Prometheans, a race of digital constructs created by the Forerunners but clearly based off Bionicle. They're about as tanky as brutes were, with the added annoyance that they can be revived after dying by flying drones, so anytime you fight them, your first minute is spent swatting down drones and finding a new gun to finish out the Prometheans, while you're sworn by a bunch of cannon fodder robot dogs. Every fight with them plays out the same. There is zero variation. Shutting down the beams was all a ruse to trick Master Chief into freeing the Didact, the sole surviving Forerunner, who was imprisoned inside this planet. The Forerunners had a bad habit of locking dangerous things up near the end of their civilization just so they could be a problem for those who would come after them. His plan only worked because the Infinity responded to the distress beacon of the Forward Unto Dawn and was in danger of being sucked into the planet's gravity well, something that the Didact couldn't have known would happen in response to trapping the Master Chief here. But a couple 1 in a million occurrences happened so that the Chief would think this giant orb glowing with hellfire was the radio for sending messages, and the lucky breaks don't stop there. Later the Didact scans the Infinity's computers and learns that it just came from a space station where humans are studying the Composer, which is the weapon he needs to imprison humanity.
The librarian left little to chance, didn't she? Turning my own guardians, my own world, against me. But what hubris to believe she could protect her pets from me forever.
The Didact's wife, the librarian, was the one who saved humanity from being wiped out after their defeat at the hands of the Didact, and she saved them again by placing them on the Ark when the Halo rings fired. All of that effort is almost undone by saving the one Forerunner who desired to eradicate humanity while letting the rest of her people perish. I'm not certain what her strategy was in making sure he would be around to cause trouble in the future. Why not just let him die with the rest of the Forerunners?
If you haven't mastered even these primitives, then man has not attained the mantle. Your ascendance may yet be prevented.
So the Didact is freed from 100 millennia of imprisonment, he's the last of his kind, and his first goal is to wipe out humanity to stop them from ever obtaining their destiny of assuming the mantle from the now gone Forerunners. His goal made some sense back when the Forerunners were at war with humanity, and he sought to keep his species from being replaced by humans, but what is step 2 in his plan after that now? If humans don't take the mantle, then who would?
The Forerunners have returned.
Why would you call your own species Forerunner? It makes no sense, because Forerunner after all is just a way of saying someone who preceded you. But the Forerunners call themselves that, and they came after an even older alien species called the Precursors.
That Didact, he manipulated Infinity's signal to get us to release him.
He never refers to himself even once as the Didact, but Cortana knows his name regardless. Normally, the escape sequence is saved for the finale, but since Marty O'Donnell isn't scoring Halo anymore, you might as well use it anywhere you like since it lacks the energy without the old soundtrack behind it. I'm sorry, why is falling off a cliff a danger to a man who survived re-entry through the atmosphere of this planet? When the series you've been handed began by explicitly telling you that Master Chief is the last living Spartan too, you should take that to heart. It's what sets him apart from every other human soldier as something unequaled. The moment someone suggested the idea that there should be a whole bunch of other Spartans, that person should have been reassigned to the mobile game development mines. But he wasn't, and here we have an entire team of them, Spartan 4s to be precise. And all that kidnapping, hellish training, cybernetic and genetic engineering that they showed off at the beginning of this game in a CG cutscene no less, has been done away with so that anyone can become a Spartan now. Gordon Freeman isn't running around meeting other MIT graduates in hazard suits since that would dilute his own character. And when you have a character that boils down to the voice that plays over movie trailers in the theater, you don't want to thin it even more by adding a bunch of even more generic space marines to the mix. I see that Master Chief is the only Spartan who's camera shy enough to keep his helmet on during cutscenes.
I thought you'd be taller.
Even among Spartans, women have impossible to meet Tinder standards.
You were sent on a scouting run in the middle of an attack on the ship.
The captain thought Infinity could provide us cover and hold off the attack at the same time.
First, Del Rio decided to fly the most advanced starship of the UNSC fleet into the opening of a 400 Dyson sphere. Then after he crash-landed, sent all of his Spartans and a good deal of his Marines out on a random scouting mission while his ship was being attacked by Covenant forces. This is the kind of incompetence that's more about setting up an institutional foil for the hero than anything interesting, because his character has never developed beyond his bad decisions that are made only to make others look better in comparison.
There's a mantis docked inside the door. Take it.
I'm assuming the Mantis was created while Master Chief was missing in action, because it never appeared until now. So Master Chief's first response should be, what the hell is a Mantis? There's always something that needs to be activated manually, usually two things. This is how every objective in Halo 4 plays out.
You mean we're leaving?
Sir, Infinity drove the Didact back. He's vulnerable.
He isn't the only one. You know, I think you, of all people, would appreciate the benefit of living to fight another day.
After you've saved all of humanity, you're kind of past the point where the incompetent commander gets to have a problem with your opinion or methods.
The air corridor to the gravity well is blocked by a network of particle cannons. Infinity's shields are still down. Open the lane for us to move up and provide air support.
The particle cannons didn't seem to be a threat when the Infinity was pulled inside the gravity well opening, but somehow Del Rio knows that if they try to leave, the cannons will open fire on the Infinity. Also, why don't they just leave the planet with a slipstream jump? I saw Covenant ships jumping in back at the planet core.
Captain, what's Force Recon's assessment of the terrain?
I know you've been off the field for a while, Master Chief, but this is a blow-through op. Sending in a recon would just slow us down.
Master Chief asked for a scout report on the terrain and was denied since it would slow them down. I guess they just got lucky, since the plan was to drive a huge mammoth with a MAC gun on it around the basin to destroy the cannons, and there just happened to be a naturally occurring dry riverbed for it to use as a road. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to reach its objective. I don't believe a MAC cannon on the back of a mammoth requires painting a target with a laser before it can fire. Laser targeting is reserved for guided munitions, not railguns. The particle cannon is right next to it in clear view. Just aim the damn gun and fire.
I am what remains of the Forerunner, once known as the Librarian. My memories will retain to assist humanity on their path to the mantle. Though sadly, that plan is now at risk. The Didact is leaving Requiem.
Turns out that leaving the one Forerunner who wanted to wipe out all of humanity as the last of your species was a mistake. Who'd have guessed?
He seeks this. The Composer. A device which will allow him to finally contain the greatest enemy ever faced by the Forerunners. You.
That makes humans sound pretty awesome, but it isn't true, since the Forerunners defeated humanity and then later lost to the Flood, and had to settle with a Pyrrhic victory by firing the Halo array to wipe out all sentient life, including themselves to stop them, meaning the Flood were the bigger threat.
When the Didact finally exhausted the humans after a millennia.
In a millennia of fighting, no one ever tried some diplomacy to figure out what they were even fighting over. The humans were running from the Flood. They could have at least tried to explain that.
In the Forerunner's quest for transcendence, the Composer had been intended to bridge the organic and digital realms. The Flood only assimilated living tissue. The Composer would provide the Didact his solution and his revenge.
The Composer converts living things into a digitized form and stores it, and this was used initially on humans during their war with the Forerunners, and the Didact plans to use it again to imprison all the remains of humanity. The Composer was created around the same time as the Halo array, so why couldn't the Composer be used on the Flood to digitally capture them? The Flood are organic after all.
When I indexed mankind for repopulation, I hid seeds from the Didact. Seeds which would lead to an eventuality. Your physical evolution. The gene song I placed within you contains many gifts, including an immunity to the Composer, but it must be unlocked.
You foresaw the Didact one day being freed and using the Composer against humanity, and planted a gene song that would be carried down through human generations that would one day produce someone who would be immune to the Composer. It would have been a lot easier to just kill the guy or destroy the Composer back then than encoding very specific plot armor for something that you knew would happen in a few 100,000 years. If Master Chief needs to paint a target right in front of the most advanced ship humanity has, then something is off, and the Infinity would have no chance of hitting anything in space, where targets tend to be very far away.
With all due respect, sir, I know what I saw.
And with all due respect to you, soldier, I'm not willing to jeopardize my ship because of the hallucinations of an aging Spartan and his malfunctioning AI.
For a captain who is willing to fly a ship inside a Forerunner shield world, Del Rio is awfully risk-averse now.
I am ordering you
To surrender that AI!
No, sir.
Regardless of his assessment being right, Master Chief isn't the kind of soldier to disobey direct orders. He's a product of severe military indoctrination. I don't think he even can refuse an order. Halo 4 finally allows you to pilot a Pelican, but only in single player. So instead of dropping off all your friends at a base, it's used for shooting down Banshees and nothing else. Another mission where the goal is to plug Cortana into 2 different terminals so you can access the real objective, which is plugging her into another terminal. Cortana has a rampancy freakout at the pivotal moment and fails to stop the Didact ship from leaving Requiem, making the endgame Cortana about as useful as the one you'll find on Windows 10. I guess you have to at least see a Halo ring in every Halo game. This is one of those plot points that really only makes sense for the original trilogy, but they have to keep finding a way to shoehorn one in every game because the word is on the cover. Chief, you are on the outside of a Covenant dropship's hull in space. How exactly do you have gravity acting on you right now? If you crash a ship into a space station so hard it throws you out of the ship and inside the space station, the resulting damage would leave the room exposed to vacuum. But here the room is on fire when Chief comes to, meaning there's breathable atmosphere.
Inventory lists 7 excavation-grade Havoc mines. Just one of those would turn this base into a piñata.
They were using nukes to excavate a Halo ring? That was a proposed idea for nuclear weapons after World War II that was quickly abandoned because of radioactive fallout, and a Halo ring could be destroyed by a megaton explosion. See the ending of the first game. I don't see how different genetics keeps you from being digitized and stored on a hard drive.
They'll pair you with another AI. Maybe even another Cortana model if Halsey lets them.
That's not going to happen.
At the time of this video being made, a trailer for Halo Infinite was released that suggests exactly that, and Chief seemed perfectly fine with the change. Why does the Didact ship have a giant trench spanning its hull? This isn't even a real rhetorical question. You know why it does.
Chief, it's Lasky. Is that you?
Affirmative, sir. Where's the captain?
Fleetcom didn't take too kindly to his abandoning you in Requiem. I'm afraid I'll have to do.
That Del Rio problem was only an issue for one thing and then he's jettisoned from the plot off screen.
We could try punching a hole in that hull plating, but Infinity won't be able to get a clear shot with all that black.
We'll take care of the guns.
Flak doesn't prevent you from taking a shot in space. You're not pulling a bombing run where you have to fly over a target.
We'll have to deploy the warhead manually. How and where?
It's a nuke. You don't need to plant it right beside the target. Set it off now and it's still a guaranteed kill. Forerunners must have been a race of adrenaline junkies, based on their methods of getting around their own ships using gravity cannons and floors have to appear under you as you fly through the air.
I've got to do something you're not going to like.
Cortana's plan is to install copies of herself onto the Didact's computers, then slow down his system and make it worse. Just like in reality. Also, just like everything else in the game, you're tasked with getting Cortana to 2 terminals, which was exactly what they did to free him in the first place.
Still, you fail.
Well, it's only Las Vegas, Nevada. Weird place to start wiping out humanity though. Did the Didact lose at the craps tables there before?
So misguided.
You could just drop Chief and it would all be over. The urge to monologue is just too strong, it seems. Master Chief was nowhere near the ledge to grab it when the Didact lost his telekinetic grip on him. Halo learned from Call of Duty's bad habits and made its finale a quick time event, and a bad one at that. There's no reason to crawl to the nuke other than that's how Call of Duty would do it. It's not like Master Chief is injured here. There was no way to save the Master Chief here. He was touching the bomb when it went off. Cortana's about to make installing Windows 10 a stressful situation for Master Chief when he has to kill her again. Master Chief grew a foot taller over the course of the game just so he could flex on the lady who called him short earlier. I didn't have an ounce of say on whether to trust 343 Industries with this franchise, and clearly whoever did made a huge mistake.
What do you get when you cross a joke with a rhetorical question?